The chill of the winter night bit at Anya's exposed skin, but it was nothing compared to the icy grip around her heart. Preston's words, sharp and dismissive, echoed in her ears. "You're just not what I'm looking for, Anya. Especially not for Christmas." He'd left her on the frost-dusted cobblestones, the festive glow of the high street blurring through the tears that streamed down her face. Another failed attempt at connection. Another hollow promise whispered into the void of her loneliness. The empty chair opposite her at the cafe, now a distant memory, was a monument to her failure to connect, to belong. She clutched her worn coat tighter, the faux fur offering no real warmth. The scent of pine and cinnamon, usually so comforting, now felt like a cruel mockery of the joy she couldn't find. She'd tried so hard, decorated her small apartment with hopeful lights, bought a ridiculously expensive gift, only to have her efforts met with a shrug and a casual, almost practiced rejection. Her hands trembled. Her eyes burned. The lamplight cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to mock her solitude, stretching and twisting like specters of past heartbreaks. Each disappointed breath was a ragged sob. She remembered her grandmother's words, whispered years ago as they watched the first snowfall. "Darling, sometimes the greatest gifts are found in the most unexpected storms." Anya had dismissed it then, a child's naive understanding of poetic language. Now, stumbling through the snow, the words felt like a distant, cruel echo. This storm felt only like an ending. She just wanted to disappear, to melt into the pristine white blanket that was steadily covering the city, to let the snow erase her existence. Every disappointment had led her here, to this moment of absolute, crushing despair. It was a familiar path, one she'd walked too many times before, each step heavier than the last. The weight of it threatened to buckle her knees. She just wanted to be home, cocooned in darkness, away from the mocking twinkle of Christmas lights and the cheerful laughter that seemed to emanate from every window. As she rounded a quiet corner, the sound of a distant carol fading, a movement caught her eye. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness beneath a snow-laden ancient oak. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was more. Taller, perhaps, than any man, with an almost ethereal grace that defied the biting cold. The street lamp, flickering momentarily, caught the glint of something sharp, almost like ancient silver, on his tailored coat. His presence was a stark contrast to the desolate street, a sudden powerful stillness in the swirling snow. He was an anomaly, a dramatic pause in her desperate flight. She barely registered his approach, her world still an emotional blur of tears and self-pity, until a voice, deep and resonant like the cello music she adored, cut through the quiet despair. It was cool, shockingly so, but steady and firm, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "May I help you?" His question, so simple yet utterly profound in its timing, jolted her. Anya stopped, blinking, the tears momentarily forgotten. She looked up, truly looked, and her breath hitched. The man was breathtaking. His eyes, dark as polished obsidian, held a depth that seemed to encompass all the sorrows and wonders of time. His cheekbones were sharp, aristocratic, and a faint, almost imperceptible silver thread wove through his raven-black hair, visible only in the faint glow. A single, perfect snowflake rested on his long, elegant eyelashes, refusing to melt. He wore a coat of the deepest midnight velvet, a subtle shimmer hinting at an ancient, rich fabric, and beneath it, a pristine white shirt that gleamed. He wasn't just handsome. He was a living sculpture carved from myth and moonlight. Anya stammered, completely flustered. Her misery, so overwhelming just moments before, now felt strangely trivial under his intense gaze. He was waiting, patiently, his posture unwavering. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. He didn't pity her, she realized. His eyes held a quiet understanding, a knowing patience that felt oddly comforting. He was a guardian of the night, observing, waiting. I'm fine, she managed, a pathetic lie that crumbled under the weight of her still streaming tears. He took a single, deliberate step closer. The scent of him reached her then. Not the sickly, sweet perfume of Preston, but something clean, ancient, like frost on old stone, mixed with a faint, intoxicating hint of something else, something wild and untamed, like a winter forest after a storm. Your tears suggest otherwise, he said, his voice softer now, almost a murmur against the hush of the snow. Sometimes the cruelest rejections are merely redirections, a closure to one path, so another may open. He paused, his gaze unwavering. May I offer you shelter, at least until the storm of your emotions has passed? The words were unusual, poetic, almost archaic, yet they resonated deep within her. Shelter, not just from the snow, but from the storm within. This was no ordinary man. Even at 5 years old, the Shadowkin twins had learned to read people. Astrid, the more observant, nudged Bronte, her sister. He's sad, too, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crunch of their tiny boots on the freshly fallen snow. Bronte, ever the protector, nodded. But she's sadder. Her tears are big. Anya stared at him, bewildered. Who are you? He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of ancient courtesy. My name is Lysander Voronin, and you, gentle human, are lost. He didn't ask if she was lost, but stated it as a fact, with an almost unnerving certainty. Lost indeed, not just geographically, but profoundly, utterly lost in the labyrinth of her own disappointment. Lysander extended a hand, gloved in dark fine leather. His touch, when it came, was cool, shockingly so, but steady and firm. It wasn't the fleeting, hesitant touch of a stranger, but a deliberate, comforting grip that promised stability. Come, he urged softly, his dark eyes holding hers captive. The night is long, and you shouldn't face it alone. The invitation was a lifeline, extended in the heart of her darkest moment. Preston's cruelty was a beginning, not an end. Maybe they were supposed to cross tonight. She hesitated for only a fraction of a second, her common sense warring with the inexplicable pull she felt towards this enigmatic stranger. The sheer impossibility of the situation, a dark, impossibly handsome man appearing out of a blizzard to offer solace, should have terrified her. Yet, in his presence, a strange sense of calm began to settle over her. She nodded, her throat tight with unspoken gratitude. Lysander's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a flash of white against the dim light. He led her away from the desolate street, not towards a bustling pub or a brightly lit cafe, but down a narrow, snow-covered alleyway that seemed to open into another world. The mundane sounds of the city faded, replaced by the hushed whispers of the wind and the soft crunch of their footsteps. He walked with a silent, effortless grace, as if he were part of the shadows themselves. They emerged into a small, secluded square dominated by an imposing ancient manor house, its dark stone facade adorned with ivy thick with winter berries. No festive lights here, no boisterous carols, just a quiet, profound majesty. Lysander guided her up a set of wide, snow-dusted steps to a heavy oak door. It opened silently at his touch, revealing an interior bathed in the warm, inviting glow of candlelight. The air within was rich with the scent of old books, something herbal, and a faint, sweet aroma she couldn't quite place. It was a stark contrast to the biting cold outside, a sanctuary. "Welcome to my home, Anya Selwyn," he said, his voice a low rumble. He knew her name. How? The question hung unspoken, but his gaze, deep and knowing, seemed to answer it without words. She stepped inside, a sense of wonder washing over her. The entrance hall was vast, dimly lit, with high ceilings and ancient tapestries depicting scenes she couldn't quite decipher in the dim light. A grand staircase carved from dark wood swept upwards into the shadows. Before she could fully take it all in, two small figures emerged from the deeper recesses of the hall, twin blurs of dark hair and curious eyes. They were little girls, no older than 5, dressed in simple but exquisitely made dark velvet dresses, their pale faces framed by identical dark braids. They looked strikingly similar to Lysander, a miniature feminine version of his intense beauty. "Papa, you brought someone!" one of them exclaimed, her voice a sweet, clear bell. "Is she lonely, like us?" the other added, her large, intelligent eyes fixed on Anya. Lysander knelt effortlessly to their level, his expression softening into something so tender it nearly brought fresh tears to Anya's eyes. "Astrid Bronte, this is Anya. And yes, my dears, I believe she is." The twins, Astrid and Bronte, exchanged a glance. Even at 5 years old, the Shadowling twins had learned to read people, their quiet observations often cutting to the heart of matters adults complicated. Astrid, the more observant, stepped forward, her small hand reaching out hesitantly. Can we join you?" she asked Anya, her voice soft but earnest. Bronte, ever the protector, nodded, her large eyes mirroring her sister's hopeful plea. The question hung in the air, innocent yet profoundly significant. It was a stark echo of every longing Anya had ever felt, every quiet wish for connection. The small hands reaching out, the genuine invitation, was everything Preston had denied her. "We don't like to eat alone," Astrid added, almost as if sensing Anya's hesitation. "Papa makes the best hot chocolate." Anya's heart, so recently fractured, began to mend itself in the warmth of their innocent invitation. "Yes," she whispered, a genuine smile finally gracing her lips. "Yes, I would love to join you." Lysander watched her, a silent observer, a subtle shift in his dark eyes indicating a quiet approval. He stood, his gaze meeting hers over the heads of his daughters. There was a history in his eyes, a depth of experience that hinted at countless Christmases past, each one perhaps carrying its own solitude. He gestured towards an archway revealing a cozy dining room where a long dark wood table was already set, not with opulent silver and crystal, but with simple, comforting earthenware. A blazing fireplace cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the scent of spiced meat and something delicious, baking slowly, filled the air. "The kitchen is where the heart of the home beats," he murmured, his voice a low invitation. "Please, make yourself comfortable." As Anya followed the twins, their small hands now linked with hers, Lysander observed her from the shadows. He had seen countless lonely souls wander his city streets, particularly at this time of year, a season that amplified both joy and despair. But Anya, there was a resilience beneath her sorrow, a quiet strength that resonated with something deep within him. He was a creature of ancient solitude, a Dajagger Countess's consort centuries ago, now merely a protector of his daughters, a silent guardian of the forgotten. His life was a tapestry of hushed routines, scholarly pursuits, and the fierce protection of Astrid and Bronte, who carried a rare, potent magic in their veins. He'd learned long ago that vulnerability was a luxury he couldn't afford. especially not with humans, their lives so fleeting, their emotions so volatile. Yet, with Anya, there was a curious pull, a sense of alignment he hadn't experienced in generations. Perhaps it was the purity of her despair or the unexpected warmth that sparked in her eyes when his daughters reached out to her. He found himself inexplicably drawn to the gentle humanity she embodied. Later, gathered around the crackling fire in a sitting room filled with plush velvet armchairs and towering bookshelves, the conversation flowed easily. The twins, unburdened by adult reticence, peppered Anya with questions, their curiosity infectious. They spoke of fantastical creatures and ancient tales. There wove a rich tapestry of magic that Anya, even in her wildest dreams, had never imagined. Lysander sat opposite, a silent presence, occasionally offering a dry remark or a historical anecdote that seamlessly wove into the children's fantastical narratives. "Papa says loneliness is like a shadow," Astrid announced thoughtfully, munching on a gingerbread cookie. "It follows you until you step into the light." Bronte nodded in agreement. "But you have to let the light find you." Lysander, observing Anya's reaction, offered a rare, genuine smile. "They have a knack for simplifying the profound." Anya, warmed by the fire and the unexpected company, felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. "They're right," she admitted, gazing into the flames. "I think I've been running from the light for a long time." She found herself telling him, haltingly at first, about Preston, about the string of disappointments, the quiet ache of unfulfilled dreams. Lysander listened, not with pity, but with a quiet, intense focus that made her feel truly heard for the first time. He never interrupted, only offered a slight nod or a thoughtful hum, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, a comfortable silence settled, broken only by the crackle of the fire. "It takes courage to acknowledge your own vulnerability, Anya," he finally said, his voice a low, comforting murmur. "To stand in the shadow and still seek the light." He then shared subtly glimpses of his own story, not in explicit detail, but in the melancholic tone of his voice when he spoke of ancient times, of duties spanning centuries, of the quiet burden of immortality. He hinted at a life lived in shadows, a protector of a lineage most humans never even knew existed. He spoke of the Dajagr, a race intertwined with the mystical, of ancient pacts and timeless responsibilities, all without ever breaking the illusion of a normal, albeit unusually cultured, existence. He described the solitude of watching empires rise and fall, of loving and losing, of the quiet despair that came with outliving every one you cared for. He was, she realized, as lonely in his immortality as she was in her fleeting mortality. They were two sides of the same coin, bound by an invisible thread of shared solitude. The conversation drifted, fluid and unforced, from ancient lore to modern poetry, from the intricate dance of the constellations to the simple beauty of a snowflake. Lysander was a wellspring of knowledge, his mind a library of forgotten histories and profound philosophies. He quoted poets she'd never heard of, his voice weaving magic into their words, making them sing with new meaning. Anya, who had always felt a quiet passion for literature and history, found herself captivated, drawn into the elegant dance of his intellect. It was more than a conversation. It was a connection, a resonance of souls. "Do you believe in fate, Lysander?" she asked him late into the night, the twins long since asleep in their beds. He looked at her, his dark eyes shimmering in the candlelight. "I believe that every step, every choice, every disappointment is a brushstroke on the canvas of our lives," he replied, his voice soft. "Sometimes the artist chooses to paint in shadow, only to reveal the true light that was always meant to shine. Perhaps the weak man didn't come so you could meet us instead. His words struck a chord deep within her. The casual cruelty of Preston, the sting of rejection, suddenly felt less like a wound and more like a redirection, just as Lysander had said. Every disappointment had led her here, to this unexpected sanctuary, to this profound connection with a man and his daughters who felt more like family than anyone she'd known. The night passed in a blur of meaningful conversation and comfortable silences. As the first hint of dawn painted the sky in hues of soft gray and rose, Anya knew she couldn't stay. She had obligations, a life to return to, however bleak it had seemed yesterday. But something within her had shifted. The raw ache in her heart had been replaced by a quiet, hopeful warmth. As she stood to leave, Lysander walked her to the door. The twins, surprisingly, were already awake, their small faces peeking out from behind his legs. "Will you come back?" Bronte asked, her voice small and hopeful. Anya knelt, hugging them both tightly. "Yes," she promised, "I will." She looked up at Lysander, a silent question in her eyes. "Will you let me?" He reached out, his cool hand gently brushing a stray tear from her cheek, a tear not of sorrow, but of gratitude and a burgeoning hope. "Anya," he murmured, his voice rich with unspoken meaning, "my door and our hearts are always open to you." He paused, his gaze intensifying. Some stories, like some connections, are written in the stars, regardless of the paths we think we are meant to walk. He held her gaze for a long moment, a silent promise passing between them. The Christmas lights on the high street, no longer mocking, now seemed to sparkle with a new, profound meaning. Preston's dismissal, the tears, the biting cold. It had all been a prelude. Her shattered Christmas had not been an ending, but a new, magical beginning. Anya walked out into the crisp morning air, a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in years. The city, still dusted with snow, seemed to shimmer with possibility. She carried with her not the sting of rejection, but the quiet warmth of acceptance, the profound joy of an unexpected connection. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that her journey had just truly begun. Lysander Voronin, the vampire king, had stepped from the snow, not just to offer help, but to rewrite her destiny, and she, Anya Selwyn, was ready to embrace it. For some, Christmas was a time of familiar traditions. For Anya, it became the moment her world fractured, only to be pieced back together by a silent ancient king and two curious magical children, revealing a love story far grander than any she had ever dreamed. It was a testament that sometimes the most profound connections are forged not in the bright light of expectation, but in the deepest, most unexpected shadows of a winter's night.